Yeah. Football Beast, Football Beast, this the Football Beast Extra Podcast. Hey, Football Beast, Football Beast, Football Beast Extra Podcast. Playing soccer, grab your keys. Playing soccer, time to meet. Playing soccer, time to greet. They finna talk a lot, okay? Playing soccer, get the cleats. Playing soccer, let's get it. Playing soccer, let's go. Football Podcast.
Hello everyone, welcome to the FPL show for Game Week 2. My name is Andrew from the Football Feast Extra podcast team, and today we are going to be looking at the breakdown for last week. Let's see who's got the most points, let's see who's injured or not going to play next week. Let's have a look at the fixtures and who's doing well in the Fantasy Football League. Anyone that's joining live, feel free to write anything in the comment section. I will try and interact with you as much as possible. So let's start by looking at the league table for Game Week 2. So this is what we've got so far. We're going to go to the top and we're going to take an in-depth look at the top 5 teams in the league so far. So I'm just going to give shout-outs to Romy Baker, Callum Robb, Courtney Robinson, Mike Oakes, and Uma Musaji. I apologise if I've butchered your name there. The top 5 going into Game Week 3. So we're going to take an in-depth look at all 5 of these teams, starting with the early league leaders. 67 points last week. Really, really good return. And as you can see, the team is dominated by Brighton players. The 2 Brighton players are Estepinion and March getting 11 and 15 points respectively. And look at that, Mbeumo as well, 16 points, the highest scoring player in Game Week 2. And if you have a look at his bench, it's actually got some points on the bench as well that he could have had. Areola with 10 points, and Edison was in the team with 6. Semenyo as well, 6 points. Emerson with 4. Only Reece James and João Pedro scoring 0 points in this team. Of course, Emerson as well. Chilwell was in the team. Shaw was in the team. So it could have been an even better week for the current leader. Let's take a look at the second team. It's Me Mario. Love the team name. 59 points. Let's look at the team. Again, you'll see a common theme with these teams, I'm sure. Brighton players dominate the team. Estepinion as well. Mitoma, the 2 that got the points this week. A really good choice picking Saliba as well. 8 points for the centre-back after having a really good game against Palace. Went with the decision to captain Mo Salah rather than Erling Haaland, which paid off. Haaland drawing a blank and Salah getting 10 points. So a good pick there. And somebody that's taken a risk on Phil Foden. Look, it's not guaranteed he's going to get minutes, but when he does play, he looks excellent. And he got the assist for the Alvarez goal against Newcastle at the weekend. So 9 points as well for Phil Foden. Bruno Fernandes not having the best of games, only getting 1 point. Bukayo Saka with 3. It seems that Bukayo Saka has been taken off penalties, so that's something we can go into a little bit later. He's probably still going to make most people's teams, but worth noting that he's not taking penalties for Arsenal at the moment, by the looks of it. And looking at the bench, Onana, Mubamba, Bell, and Baldock. So it's pretty much a throwaway bench to get all these players in. So a great looking team. Let's look at third place. Boys and Dahoud. I love that name. Boys and Dahoud. Courtney Robinson, 54 points. Matt Turner, who's turning out to be quite a good pick. I know only 2 points in Game Week 2, but for such a cheap price point, he's quite a popular option. Aarons, Saliba, and Estepinion. All 3 teams so far have had the Brighton fullback, Estepinion, in their team. And another one that's picked William Saliba, getting a lot of points this week. Courtney has gone with Erling Haaland as the captain, as so many people have done. Drew a blank, of course, and Mo Salah would have been the better choice. Of course, Mbeumo would have been the even better choice, but you're very brave and probably very ahead if you captained Mbeumo in Game Week 2. Saka, Fernandes, Moussa Diaby as well in the team, and another person was João Pedro. I think, again, that's all 3 that picked João Pedro so far who didn't play. I think he did come on in the second half there, and also he got booked. So 0 points for João Pedro. And another throwaway bench. We've got Edison in goal, who was rotated because of the tough fixture against Newcastle. Baldock, James, and McCarthy on the bench. A solid week for Courtney. And let's take a look at Mike Oakes. He was last week's leader. So he's dropped down to 4th place after a fairly comfortable game week, 45 points. Not the worst, not the best. Let's take a look at his team. Again, a common theme, Estepinion in that team, João Pedro in the team. I think he's probably going to have been transferred out of quite a few people's teams this week, considering he doesn't look guaranteed to start. I mean, it was Danny Welbeck that started for Brighton at the weekend. And you've got Evan Ferguson as well in line to start. So it's not guaranteed that João Pedro is going to start games. So I can see a lot of people taking him out of their teams. Onana in goal, Rico Henry and Ben Chilwell in defence. And nice clean sheet for Rico Henry. That was a good pick. Diaby, Maddison and Saka. 3 points apiece. We've already gone through Saka and Diaby. Maddison may have picked up a knock. So he may be out for the next game. So that could be worth looking into in terms of transfers. This was a phenomenal decision to captain Luis Diaz, 14 points. And that's probably actually saved Mike's game week here, because actually, other than Estepinion, it was a very poor week for his team. So well done on that decision to captain Luis Diaz. Looking at the bench, Areola with 10 points would have been an excellent choice in goal ahead of Onana. Isaac on the bench, smart decision considering who they were playing. John Stones on the bench and Roberts on the bench. So a fairly average week that could have been a lot better or a lot worse for Mike. And the final player we're going to look at is Umar, return of the Mac, 54 points. So a good week, good solid week for Umar. Matt Turner in goal, another player with Matt Turner, very, very popular pick. He rounds off our complete top 5 sets, having Estepinion. So every single person in the top 5 had him this week. Rico Henry and Udoji, again, it's another name that I struggle to pronounce, but that was a solid pick as well, considering their clean sheet. Must have picked up a yellow card yet, which is why he got 5 points, but a good pick. Matoma as well, 12 points. A very good pick. He got a goal and an assist, and so did Estepinion. So a very good week for people that had that Brighton double up. Marcus Rashford blanked again. People starting to maybe look at taking him out of their teams, but they do have Nottingham Forest next. We will look at that in more detail when we look ahead to the next fixtures. Martinelli in the team and Bukayo Saka, the Arsenal double up that worked so well last season, not really happening for the two at the moment. The 2 games that Arsenal have played have been very, very tightly fought, and although Saka and Martinelli did get decent points against Forest, only 3 each in the game against Palace. Luis Diaz, another good pick. Not everyone's got him. 7 points for Diaz, another good game for him. Another person falling victim to the Haaland captaincy, blanking, and as well João Pedro in the team, who obviously got 0 points. The bench is fairly throwaway. You've got Onana, who could have rotated with Turner, both on 2 points. Gabriel, who seems to be out of favour or just not fitting Mikel Arteta's tactical approach at the moment. So he's not a guaranteed starter. Dropped to the bench, which was probably a smart decision. Mubamba and Reece James, who is on the long-term injury list. That rounds up our top 5. So very, very well done to those 5 players. And as I scroll down the list, we can see some of the rises and falls. You can see where I am here, 16th with 50 points. I had a sort of average game week. Had a lot of the players, let's quickly go into it, that were mentioned here. Estepinion and Matoma, that double up. But again, I had the same issue with Bukayo Saka, Marcus Rashford, Fernandes and Martinelli all having poor weeks. Desai having a poor week as well for Chelsea and that 3-1 defeat. Ollie Watkins appears to be off of penalties now as well for Aston Villa, with Douglas Luiz taking the penalty at the weekend, which is more points lost. Let's take a quick look at the other hosts just to see where they are in our own league. We've got Mr. Barron, 1 point and 1 place below me on 119. 46 points for the week for Barron. Another person with Matt Turner in goal. People, I think, have identified that Sheffield United fixture as an easy one. It was a shame that there was a world of goal scored by Sheffield United to break that clean sheet. Good pick with Pinnock and Saliba and Powell. Actually, a solid choice in defence. Kovacic had a fairly straightforward game with 3 points and a clean sheet. Rashford, Saka, we've discussed them and both blanked in their fixtures. Went with Mo Salah as the captain over Haaland, which turned out to be a good decision. Again, Salah with 10 points, Haaland with 2. Barron stuck with Isaac in attack and decided not to drop him, and he blanked as well. And Darwin Núñez struggling to get a start for Liverpool. I can't see him being in Barron's team for much longer if he doesn't play. Chukwuemeka on the bench, injured now, but 5 points for him due to the goal he scored for Chelsea, as well as Edison. 6 points would have been a better option for Barron. But that is Barron's game week. And finally, we're going to take a look at Billy's team, if I can find it. Let's have a look. There he is, Billy Campbell. He got 55 points. So actually, out of the host, he had the best week points-wise. After a bit of a poor first game week, you can see here he's taken a 4-point hit, making 2 transfers. Another player with Matt Turner in goal. Luke Shaw, Colwell at the back, which did cost him points, really. Udogie as well. Udogie at the back, 5 points for him, as we've discussed earlier. Another player that took a risk on Phil Foden, who got 9 points. And I think the only player that we've looked at so far that actually went with Martin Odegaard as the Arsenal pick over Saka and Martinelli, which turned out to be a fantastic decision. 11 points for Odegaard, taking that penalty. Will he be on penalties permanently? We don't know, but for this week, very, very good decision, and it helped Billy claw some points back. I don't know how I'm going to pronounce this. Sabasalai, that was my best shot at it. Looks good for Liverpool, really quick dribbler, 5 points, got an assist against Bournemouth. So a decent pick, considering not many midfielders had great games. Marcus Rashford as well, blanking. Again, it's probably one that a lot of people are looking at whether to keep him or not. Julian Alvarez, 7 points. I mean, it was a phenomenal decision to go with Alvarez and Foden. Not many people, if anyone, has gone for that double up, considering the minutes risk. But 7 and 9 points for Alvarez and Foden. Really good decision. Captaining Ollie Watkins, which was about as good a decision as Captain Salah. It's better than captaining Haaland. And it's paid off for Billy this week as he's got the most points out of the hosts. Quick look at Billy's bench. Jordan Pickford with 0 points. Eze with 2, who just didn't really get going against Arsenal. Reece James will probably be transferred out soon. He's on the bench, injured at the moment. And Kabore makes up the bench for Billy. Okay, so that's the league. That's where things stand at the moment on game week 2. We are just going to take a quick look at the player performance for the last week. So this is the round points. So this is the points for game week 2. And then we'll take a quick look at the overall scoreboard for this week. So Mbeumo leading the way with 16 points. Had the best game out of anyone this week. Solly March only 1 point behind. 15 points for him. Got 2 goals, both set up by NCCO. Leon Bailey as well, 14 points. Really good performance from him. Mitoma on 12. Diego Jota as well on 12. Not seen anybody with Diego Jota, probably because he's a minutes risk, but really good week for him. And then the rest of the list is followed up with Martin Odegaard, Visa, Estepinian, and Vicario, all on 11 points. And then the rest is Luca Ding, John McGinn on 10. So these were the best players to pick for last week. Let's have a look at how they look overall. So total points for the whole of FPL after 2 weeks. Solly March leads the way with 24 points. 2 solid weeks for him. Mbeumo as well, 23 points. A lot of players have gone with Mbeumo, as you can see here. So yeah, owned on 19.8% of players. So a fair amount of people gone with Mbeumo in their team, mainly because he's a midfielder in FPL and he's listed as a striker. It's a striker for Brentford, so likely to get you points. Appears to also be on penalties. Visa, who does play up front as well for Brentford, on 20 points. Really good start for the Brentford forwards in FPL. It's dipping you on 18 points in total after having a okay first game, but a really good second game with that goal and assist. Mitoma on 17. Rodri had an amazing game week 1. A lot of people have then put him in the teams. You can see 10.1% of people now own Rodri. You can guarantee that would not have been the case last week. 10.1% own Rodri, 16 points in total. Leon Bailey with 15, Luis Diaz with 15. He looks, other than Salah, he looks to be the one in the Liverpool forward line that is going to keep his place if he stays fit. So he might be worth a punt. But we will look at Liverpool's fixtures and we'll look at everyone's fixtures in a minute to see if it's worth doubling, tripling up on Liverpool assets. Erling Haaland actually, quite far down the list, 15, joint with Bailey Diaz. Obviously ran away with it. By this time last season, he was already miles clear. I'm sure he probably will be by the end of the season. But so far, a humble performance from Erling Haaland in the first 2 weeks. Rafael Varane had an amazing game week 1, along with Isaac. Leno as well with a brilliant game week 1. Only a few points each this week, but the high scoring game week 1 has given them a lot of points. Awoniyi for Nottingham Forest. Just a quick word on him. Scored in both the games that he's played so far for Forest. Does look to be Nottingham Forest's first choice. He started on the bench against Arsenal, but I think he will probably start many more games. Obviously, we need to look at Nottingham Forest fixtures, but could be one to keep an eye on, especially if you're looking for maybe a bench option. And then we'll end it with the Arsenal quartet of Saliba, Ødegaard, Saka, and Nketiah, all on 13 points. Okay, so let's finally look at the fixtures that are coming up for each team. This is the game week coming up. The one that stands out is obviously Chelsea v Luton. That's why I would recommend, if you are looking at making any transfers this week, to look at Chelsea attackers. They've got a favourable few games coming up, as we'll take a look in a minute. I think they've got Bournemouth next. So looking at Chelsea, I know they've not been great so far, but that is possibly where the points are. So keeping an eye on that. Bournemouth playing Spurs at home. I mean, it's a good fixture for Spurs, but Bournemouth are never an easy place to go to at home. I'd probably be, as silly as it may sound, I'd be more worried if this game was under the lights if I was a Tottenham fan, which thankfully I'm not. But yeah, if you fancy Spurs strongly there, maybe double up on some Tottenham assets. Arsenal versus Fulham at the Emirates. You would expect Fulham to maybe line up similarly to the way that Palace and Forest lined up with a low block. The one thing I'd say about Arsenal is to maybe stay away from, other than Saliba, to stay away from their defence, because I have no idea what Mikel Arteta's doing at the moment. He's trialling things with Tomiyasu now suspended. I don't know who comes into that back four, whether Gabriel comes back in. And even in goal, there's question marks. We don't know when Raya is going to get that first start. So if you are going to go for Arsenal assets, you might want to look at players like Nketiah, Ødegaard, Saka, and Martinelli, as they're more surefire. Brentford versus Palace. I think this is another good fixture for Brentford, bearing in mind that Palace played on the Monday night in action again, just like Arsenal at 3 o'clock away from home at Brentford. If you're looking at players like Mbeumo and Wisa, now might be the good time to put them in. Everton versus Wolves. I don't think this is a standout fixture for either team. I can't imagine many people has assets from either team. Maybe a few people own Jordan Pickford, and this isn't a bad game for him. Wolves notoriously low scorers in the league. So maybe if you do have Jordan Pickford, this is the game for him to be starting in goal for you. Or if you're looking for an option in the transfer market, then maybe Pickford is the one you want. Man United are at home to Nottingham Forest. Good fixture for Man United on paper. You would expect them to win this one comfortably at Old Trafford. It may be worth doubling up or tripling up on some Man United assets. But again, you don't really know who's going to play for them. Anthony started the game so far, but he's been poor. Whether Ten Hag drops him, you just never know. Jadon Sancho's been rotated and on the bench. it's very, very difficult to know. Garnacho's been poor. Who's going to start for United? Other than Rashford and probably Bruno Fernandes, you know that they will likely start. So it could be a good game for them. Brighton versus West Ham. This will be Brighton's toughest test, I think, so far. West Ham looked very impressive against Chelsea last week. As well, the news has come out today that Enciso is injured. Whether he'll miss the West Ham game, we're not quite sure yet, but that's a big blow for Brighton. Could be worth doubling up on Brighton assets. Mitoma, Estepinion, that combination has worked well. A lot of people also transferring in Solly March, who did very, very well. As I had mentioned earlier, the top scorer now across both game weeks. So he could be the man to come into the team. Quick look at Sunday's fixtures then. Burnley versus Aston Villa. This is a tricky game for Villa. I would maybe stay clear of Villa players is in bringing them in. If you already have players like Diaby, Pau Torres, maybe stick with them, but this could be a game to rotate them. I think that Burnley are going to get a few goals against Villa. It may be a score draw. Villa might still win it, but I don't think it's going to be easy for Aston Villa. Sheffield United versus Manchester City. This is the game that you were waiting for. Chelsea versus Luton, City away at Sheffield United. I think that probably 99% of players are going to be back to captain Erling Haaland this week, and I'd probably advise that you do that. Otherwise, you will be probably left behind if he does score well. Obviously, if he doesn't score well, then you're on the same boat as everyone else. So, sensible decision this week to captain Erling Haaland. And the tasty game this weekend, Newcastle versus Liverpool at St James's Park. A lot of people with Liverpool assets now, a lot of people with Isaac, a few people with Pope. This is an interesting one. It could go either way. Newcastle were in good form. I know they lost to Manchester City, but everyone loses to Manchester City. They were a great team, and they did hold a good account of themselves. Liverpool have been shaky, and they've been getting the results. At home, I would maybe favour Newcastle here. I would recommend not having any defenders from either of these teams. Maybe just going for players like Isaac and Luis Diaz, Mo Salah, and hoping that they can get the goals for you. So that's an in-depth look at the Premier League fixtures this weekend. We're going to skip ahead a few weeks and just glaze over some of the fixtures that other teams have got, just so we can get an idea for the next 2 or 3 fixtures if you're planning on transferring players in. So Luton, West Ham, Sheffield United, Everton, Brentford, Bournemouth. So actually, I stand corrected earlier. It's Brentford that are playing Bournemouth and not Chelsea. That must be the week after. Burnley versus Spurs. Chelsea have got Nottingham Forest, so it's still a good fixture for Chelsea. If you think they've got Luton this week, Forest next week at home. Manchester City, Fulham, Brighton, Newcastle. So those players with Brighton assets may want to think about that going into next week. Maybe you don't want to double up on Brighton this week. Maybe you want to go down to one Brighton player for the trip to Newcastle. For the game against Newcastle. Sunday's games: Palace, Wolves, Liverpool, Villa, and Arsenal, Manchester United. So again, people with Fernandes and Rashford, Saliba, Saka, Martinelli. You want to sort of pick a side here. Arsenal at home, probably going to go into the game as the favourites. So it may be worth keeping an eye on your assets for both of those 2 clubs. And finally, we'll look at the next week, the third week. It's Wolves, Liverpool. So a good week again for Liverpool. If you've benched a few of the players for that game against Newcastle, now could be a good time to bring them back in. Villa, Palace, Fulham, Luton, Man United, Brighton. Another tough game for Brighton. So that's 2 in a row. Tough games for Brighton, so worth bearing in mind. Spurs versus Sheffield United, who have got a fair few easier games, Spurs, if you look at the last few. West Ham hosting Manchester City, Everton hosting Arsenal. Bournemouth versus Chelsea, so it is Bournemouth-Chelsea. So if you think Chelsea's next 3 fixtures are Luton, Nottingham Forest and Bournemouth, so definitely worth considering. And Newcastle versus Brentford, and Nottingham Forest versus Burnley. So that is it. That is everything from Game Week 2 for the FPL. I hope that you've got a lot from this, and this has helped you make your transfers for the next few weeks. Please, if you enjoyed the stream, give us a follow. Subscribe to our YouTube, find us on Facebook, keep up to date with everything that we're doing. We've got some exciting things planned for the podcast. We've got Billy and Tom starting a EFL show that will start on Thursday the 7th of September and will recur every Thursday. I'll be back next week with FPL Game Week 3, and we of course have the full hour and a bit podcast that comes weekly between Sunday and Tuesday. We will let you know the time and date nearer the time. But yeah, subscribe, follow, and have a good one.